Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. At BriteVibe, we believe everyone deserves to be happy. But in today's world, everywhere you turn, there is division and negativity. At BriteVibe, we have created a global movement to bring 8 million people together who are inspired to live bright, live bold, and share bright vibes. Alone, it can be hard to change, but together we can change the world. Welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So Drew Dudley, welcome to the BriteVibe podcast. So happy to have you on today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, I love what you have to say. So obviously you've got the book, you do speaking. I think you do some leadership consulting. You know, your new book, This is Day One, a leadership that really matters. I love the premise of it. I love, the message that you put out in the world. And so I'd love to know more about the message that you are putting out in the world, which is really individual leadership, right? We're all leaders in our own lives. And for me, that leadership, when I listen to you, when I think about what you talk about, leadership is an individual responsibility and an individual ownership of me taking responsibility for my life. Is that fair to kind of summarize some of what you talk about?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if you really want to understand where my work comes from,
yes,
I talk in stories. So warning to you and all of the people listening is that I talk in stories, but go back to where it sort of came from. I was running the leadership development program at the University of Toronto.
Oh, okay.
I'm standing in front of a classroom one afternoon and I'm talking about leadership theory. And one of the things I've discovered in life is that theory is the word you add to interesting things to make them boring. And talk about leadership theory. Seriously, though, like pizza theory
doesn't sound as good as pizza.
Come home from the bar and you're like, let's talk about how pizza could be applied to this situation.
Right.
No, that's not how it works. But I'm looking at this group of people and they're all 18 and 19 years old. And they have no power in their lives, really. They work for part-time jobs where their bosses tell them what to do because they're 18 years old. Most of them still live at home. They have professors who tell them, here's what you have to hand in, here's when you have to hand it in, and here's how many words you get to use. There is no real power in the minds of most of the people in that room. And all the leadership theory I'm teaching is talking about influence and power and how to be in charge, how it's been understood throughout history, how it's been explained. And I look out there and I realize I'm talking about something that is unrelatable to the people in this room because they don't have this opportunity yet. And by teaching them now for something in the future, I think what we're telling them is you are not capable of this yet. Like right. Leadership is something down the road. And so I started to think a little bit about power is such an addictive thing, but we have defined it, I think, in a way that makes it accessible to a relatively small group of people. Power is the ability to get what you want. Power is the ability to exert your influence in a very effective way. Power is highly addictive. And so I thought, what power it does exist in this room? And I started to realize that the only real power the individuals in this room have is how they choose to behave on a day-to-day basis. And so my work on leadership really started with me trying to say, how can I present a leadership that isn't like training wheels? How can I present a leadership that can be used by everyone? And the thing I started to realize later on is that I looked out of that room full of students and identified these people don't feel like they have power. But as I've grown older, as I've shared the idea with more and more people, you start to realize that the feeling of powerlessness, and that is a fabricate, like in many cases, it is built so that people feel it. That feeling of powerlessness expands over a lot of people who aren't just young people. And so this is my basic premise. Leadership can be defined many different ways, but right now it's defined in ways that make it exclusionary. It says only a few people can and should be leaders, right? And I'm not saying that everyone can or should be president or CEO or senior executive. Some people don't want to do that.
Brought to you by Donald Trump 2024. No, just kidding. No. I don't want the comments. I don't want the emails.
You know what?
I don't want all the stuff. Okay.
Man is pond scum.
Drew Dudley. I just thought it was funny when you said no, not all of us should run for president. I was like, okay.
No, it's quite simple. Not like Jon Stewart 2024 or Beyonce The Rock 2024. Whatever.
Hey, now that would be a good combination. Beyonce and The Rock. I was like, I don't care
for men.
Yeah, it's like, hey, this is cool. Beyonce and The Rock, I think they'd win.
Well, is it any more redonkulous than if, however many years ago, someone was like, who's going to be president? And we're like, yeah.
Right. Well, The Simpsons did a parody, right? The Simpsons cartoon did a parody long before that was ever a reality. And I was like,
the stuff The Simpsons nails is a little creepy. But
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you and take you off. It was just right there. I had to, if I did
on that, you want to
it
rag
was
on that,
it was
the
just
world's worst
just
example of leadership in front of me. You go right ahead.
Okay, we'll get back on the track. I apologize.
I can see the fear in your eyes.
Yeah, I was like, no.
Of the comment section. Just remember, people who post in the comment section are inherently cowards for the most part. So, yeah, I said it. Come after me. I don't think you'll show up. And you have to look someone in the eye.
We'll be giving Drew's cell phone at the end of the program. Please forward all comments and concerns.
You can give
Drew Dudley.
You can give Drew's biggest enemies. You can give their cell phone numbers at the end of this. That was not an excellent example of what I talk about, by the way. There are certain things in this world that have so jumped the shark in terms of human behavior.
Yes.
It just doesn't actually apply to any of my work. But honestly, I looked at it this way.
Yeah.
Leadership exists in individual moments of interpersonal impact.
Yeah.
And the ability, I started to think about and ask everyone listening, who has the biggest impact on how you feel every day? It's the people with whom you interact every day.
Right, of course.
And that means we have a much bigger potential impact on the lives and emotions of the people around us, and vice versa, than anything a CEO or a president does. And yet all of our focus is on the individuals in those roles who have relatively little impact on our daily lives.
Right.
And so we were taught that these individual moments that we can create that are very powerful, not only have we been taught not to see them as powerful, we've actively learned to diminish them in the way we talk about them. Moments of compassion, generosity, recognition, empowerment, those are powerful moments. But we've been taught not to see them as powerful. As a matter of fact, what we do is we throw them all in this basket and we call them the little things, right? They're not little.
Right.
Simple doesn't mean little. And
right.
So my argument is that if leadership exists in those individual moments, we all have the capacity to create those moments, regardless of our age, how much money we have, where we are in the socioeconomic pattern or socioeconomic scale. But ultimately, we all have the ability to create those. It is the only source of power on earth that's accessible to everyone on earth.
Right.
Every source of power
that's interesting to say. Yeah.
And so
I like
that's my work on leadership, is I looked out at a group of people who didn't feel like they had any power. And I started to realize that it's because we've been taught to diminish the most significant power we have. It is not the only form of leadership. It is not the form that with which we become most familiar, but it is the form that's accessible to everyone.
Right.
The challenge I run into is people feel that the more accessible to people something is, it's worth less. What makes something valuable is that most people can't have it. And what I come to grips with is that pursuing or presenting leadership like that makes it less likely that people will consciously choose to engage in leadership behaviors, because it's not. That's what my work focuses on, is how to more consciously create these individual moments of interpersonal impact that I've heard called random acts of kindness. And I don't like the term, because I understand the sentiment, but we should be celebrating random acts of kindness. It should be conscious acts of kindness and generosity and empowerment and recognition. So I try to talk about a process for how to create those moments. At first, you have to think about it, but then how do we create that unconscious habit that happens every day? So that's my concept of leadership. And I swear to God, not all my answers will be that long.
And it's okay if they are. You're the guest. I'm just the host. I'm just here to make you look pretty. Two thoughts, top of mind stuff. Dr. Viktor Frankl, Man's Search for Meaning, right? Yeah. Totally talked about leadership. So here is a man, if you haven't read the book, it's kind of one of those tried and true. Talk about leadership. It's a tried and true, just need to read that book if you're in any type of, really any type of leadership position and or not, because he wasn't technically in a leadership position, but here's a Jewish doctor in a German concentration camp, World War II. And, his man's search for meaning for him was just literally what you talked about. The one thing that everyone has governance over is their response and reaction to the external and the internal world, right? Yeah, and so he ends up being a leader, literally a leader in that situation, because people are coming to him, like the high ups, the German generals or whatever, are coming to him to get treated in this concentration camp, right? I mean, it was kind of like but it was all his focus. And he talked about the people that made it and didn't. And the second thing that brought up for me, I had a gym pre-COVID and shortly past COVID that did not survive the COVID disease. And I guess we didn't vaccinate it enough, but it did not survive the COVID disease. But we had a young lady that started working there, and she started by cleaning equipment and just helping out people on the floor. And she was so passionate about helping people that within 4 to 6 months, she was on the leadership team. She went from being kind of what you would consider the lowest, kind of the lower rung on the ladder, all the way up to being on the leadership team, driving. She literally became like our culture person, because she was joy ambassador, I think is what we called her. But because she was so passionate. So it wasn't that she got a title or somebody gave her a name badge, or I went in, or one of the managers went in and said, hey, you're doing great, we're going to promote you. It was more of just like, we kept turning around going, wow, she's just really on fire and on point with what she's bringing. And so she became a leader, literally a leader by title in our organization in a relatively short amount of time, not because of the position she had, but the way she was presenting herself and bringing her passion to that position. It was contagious. We just watched it. It affected me. I ended up reading Bob Goff's Love Does book because she was so passionate about this Love Does. I was like, I've got to read this book if this is what is setting her on fire. And she's some 20-year-old young lady, and I'm in my late 40s, early 50s at that point. I'm like, that's a leader. She was leading me, right? She was leading me to be more focused on our culture, even though technically I was, considered the owner. So I totally agree that, we all have power that we don't give ourselves enough credit for, right? The other thing I thought is, it's kind of like when you ask a band to play their greatest hit and they played it about 1,000 times. And this probably comes up in every podcast you do and every show, but on the front of your book, it says lollipop moment, right? And so are you okay telling the lollipop story? Because it's obviously such a good story. Millions and millions of people have heard it, but for those on the show, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah, no, I realized that not telling that story is like Journey trying to get off stage without
right.
Stop believing. It's not.
Yeah. It's like, It's like,
I took it out of my speeches, and that was the first Q&A.
Yeah. So now you're kind of the lollipop guy, right? I mean,
and I mean, I fought that for a long time because I ran a leadership program, and you want to go and give speeches on the process you worked on, and and actually get the idea across that you could be an educator. And so I was like, oh, it's hard to have a lot of gravitas with, oh, you're the lollipop moment guy. And then I just started to realize that who am I to decide how people have decided to react to my work, right? Like, I don't want to be a motivational speaker, because I find that sometimes people don't see motivational speakers as having any like intellectual heft. But then I was like, what's wrong with being motivating? The way I've always saw it when you present, I say this to a lot of people too, is that never try to go on stage to be inspiring or motivating. Go on stage to be useful, and useful, compelling ideas are inherently motivating.
Right. So, and I think through that story, just to set it up a little bit, I think through that story, because that you did that TED Talk in 2010, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So that's been, over 12 years ago, or right around 12 years ago. But from my perspective, when I heard that story, that was totally about leadership. And not only, it was so pure too, because I really resonated with what you were talking about as far as you searched your memory, and I'm not going to give away all of it. I'll let you tell the story, but you searched your memory and you didn't have any recollection of it. I have had that happen to me, not a ton, but enough times to have a similar experience where I'm sitting down with somebody and we're talking about something, and all of a sudden they just say, hey, thank you for X, Y, and Z. And I'm just like, wow, I had no clue at it. I mean, I remember sitting across from a commercial real estate broker, and I was talking about a deal we were talking about doing, and he just stopped and he said, hey, I want to thank you. I've never actually thanked you. And he started thanking me for some of the opportunities that I provided for him that I didn't really provide. I just said yes to early on in his career. And it was a big emotional, he started tearing up. I started tearing up because I was like, I had no clue I'd had that effect on this human being. And so I think that's why leadership, I think that's why your message is so relevant, is because leadership is something we need more and more and more of right now in today's environment. We need leaders. We need strong, positive. I'll back up on strong. We need positive leaders that are out there owning, not look at me, I'm great, owning this is who I am, this is what I'm about, and I believe in change. I believe in positivity. I mean, at least these are my opinions. So I'll shut up now because I'm rambling on. I'll let you.
I think the first thing is people need to believe they have every right to see themselves as leaders.
Totally.
That's the difference. The young woman you talked about, can see herself as someone having an impact. And when I try to reframe for people that if you stop seeing leadership as about power and titles and you start seeing it as impact, you can better reflect on how you're having impact. And it's a lot easier to have daily impact than it is to become president of something. And it's also something that happens every day as opposed to something that happens as a benchmark along the way.
Right.
So the lollipop story, what you'll get here actually is some of the context for the lollipop story, which is not what most people get. So
and you realize I'm in Kansas, so like when you say lollipop, I'm thinking in my head was the Lollipopkins, the lollipop from the Wizard of Oz. It just starts playing because I'm in Kansas, right? They basically douse us in this stuff. So anyway, the lollipop.
I can only imagine that, like Iowans and Field of Dreams, right? It's just
right.
like we're more than that one movie they made about us, right?
Right. Exactly.
But ultimately, I used to run a charity called Students Fighting Cystic Fibrosis here in Canada. Started as a volunteer running a one campus campaign as part of a Canada-wide 60 campus campaign, and eventually moved up the leadership ranks, became the national chair.
Oh, wow.
The organization works where you've got your national steering committee, and then you've got 60 to 100 representatives from 65 colleges and universities across the country. And they each September raise about $1 million collectively to support the work of Cystic Fibrosis Canada. And so
can I ask you a question right there? Sure. And I know I'm butting in here, but why did you, because I'm always curious about the backstory. What was your motivation for wanting to volunteer for cystic fibrosis? Because I feel, I actually feel like that's an important piece of this story.
Yeah, I usually skip over that part. I became involved. No, I became involved for a girl. All kinds of great I was in love with this girl.
Oh, beautiful.
Man, I was head over heels. She's my star. I think her name was Megan.
Oh, yeah.
That didn't work out, but
I
went to this tiny little school on the East Coast called Mount Allison University. And there's 2,200 students there, and ultimately everybody goes home in the summer. It's a liberal arts college. Right. And so very few people stay. And the girl I was into stayed for the summer, and I needed a job. And I went in to do a graphic design job, and they had added this charity campaign to this like weird graphic design job because it was there all summer. And they discovered that running the campaign remotely from far away didn't work. Because there's 60 colleges and universities that do this campaign every year, and we were the 60th best.
Got it.
And so we had some issues. We had $250 is what we donated. Number one school donated $160,000.
They're like, it takes more to support your deal than it does for you, than the money you raise, basically, right?
And so I got involved in that. We had some great experiences. We broke a bunch of records. But the difference in the schools when they went to the national conference. So you go away to a national conference and you represent an organization that makes $2,000 for a charity campaign. In the same room as you are 5 schools that make almost $200,000.
Right.
It feels weird. People get very excited. You're around energetic, like-minded young people. You get fired up. You make a goal. You tell us what the goal is, and then you go home and you don't make the goal.
Right.
And then they stop calling us.
Oh, wow.
And then they wouldn't answer our phone calls.
Oh, wow.
They had made a goal, and they hadn't met up, and we become such good friends, and they had been inspired by the other students they met, and now they felt like failures.
Right.
And so they said they make 2,000, they made 1,000. Well, now they won't answer the calls because they're embarrassed and they don't want to talk to us. They felt like they've let us down. So what I started to do is at the end of the conference every year for these 100 people who then went out and trained 35,000 people.
Oh, wow.
Out in the communities, is I told them this story because I told them the story not about leadership. I told them the story to prove a point that I think is part of leadership, which is that it's not the goals you set. It's not even the goals you reach. It's how you behave in pursuit of your goals that really defines who you are. And so I told them this story about my experience when I was in their position. All right. I was running a campaign. I wasn't on the leadership team. So one of the things we did to raise money is we would send out the best looking crew of people from our university.
I like the transparency in this. That's what I love about podcasting.
Like if you had chiseled cheekbones.
I love the transparency in the thing. It's like marketing people. You got to make it look good.
Oh, well, the thing is, you got to learn all these things when you don't have any money.
Right.
Like it's amazing what someone with no money can do with $1,000.
I love
and
it.
Somebody who has money can't do nearly as much with $1,000 because They don't know how to make it work.
Right.
And so what we do is we'd fill up buckets full of lollipops, and we wait till about 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, and we'd hit the nearby cities, and we hit the clubs, and we'd send in these incredibly attractive men and women, and they just wander around and walk up to tables full of, bros, and basically be like, would you like to buy a lollipop? It's by donation, whatever. And they're always like, yeah, here's $20. Give us a bucket of lollipops, like whatever.
Right. Yeah.
But it means you got a whole room full of lollipops. We made thousands of dollars. If you're a fundraiser out there, especially a young one, I want to tell you straight up, we made thousands of dollars off of people giving us money for lollipops, much more. And so we had lollipops all over the place in a big room, of course. So on the first day of school, I walked up and down the lineup of first-year students and their parents, trying to make them laugh and trying to get them to know about the campaign. And I handed out these extra lollipops. So,
and so you're on a college. I want to make sure that we're so you're on a college campus. You're campaigning. This is when I'm still raising money. You're still a student. So you're fundraising.
This story to our young volunteers.
And this is admittance day, right? Okay, this is admittance day. So people are coming to admit to the college that you are going to. Okay.
Well, that's what I would do every day. I'd get up and I'd go out and I'd hand out these lollipops on the day they register. Got it. So let's fast forward 3 years from that day, and we'll come back to it. Okay. I'm at my farewell party for this university. I've been there a long time. I was taught letters after your name make you smarter. I roll. So I collected them. And I was there for a long time. I had a party. A young woman came up to me and says, I remember the first time I ever met you. And she told me a story from that day, that morning of registration. And she said, the night before I went to school, I started school here. I'm in a hotel room with mom and dad. I'm terrified. I'd wanted to go to school my whole life. And now the night before it happened, I'm just overwhelmed with doubt. Not smart enough, from too small a town. And she said, I decided to quit. And I started to cry. And my parents, who hadn't seen me cry in years, they were awesome. They said, look, we know you're scared. Trust us, we're way more scared than you. But you've worked so hard for this. You owe it to yourself to try. So here's our deal. Tomorrow, we get up, we go to registration. Once we're on campus, if you still think you can't do this, then we'll take you home. We love you no matter what. But if you don't at least go tomorrow to try, you're going to regret that the rest of your life. And our job as your parents is to make sure that doesn't happen.
Beautiful.
And she said, I knew they were right. My whole life I've been taught, if you want to be successful, you have to have a piece of paper from a college or university. We still teach that.
Right.
And she said, so I got up, I got in line the next day. Everybody's screaming. Matching face paint, coordinated cheers, matching t-shirts, people who plan welcome activities. They're almost always extroverts. They plan extrovert fun.
Let's scare all the introverts. Let's scare them.
And she said something that's always stuck with me, man. She said, I looked around and I said that this is another place where only extroverts are valued.
Oh, wow.
I won't spend 4 more years of my life at a place where you have to yell to fit in.
Wow.
And I've always kept that in my mind as I try to create new teams and new cultures. Like, is there any chance an introvert on their first day will think like that? Right. And because that shuts off really brilliant, hardworking.
Oh, yeah.
Like emotionally brilliant people, right? Who just don't like to be the center of attention. And so,
just like you and I, Drew.
Exactly. Like she's like, we get into line. So I go the first day, I'm in line, everyone's screaming. And while everyone is screaming, that's when I say, no, I can't do it. Too much. I tried. I turned to my parents to say, take me home, like they said they would. And before I could say it, you come busting out of the nearest building and you got this epically stupid hat. I was a professional DJ for a while and we and so she said, you're walking up and down the lineup. You've got a sign that says students fighting cystic fibrosis and a bucket of lollipops, and you're handing them out, which is what I do. And then she said, you got to me and you stared at me and you smiled a little. And then you turn next to me, to the man standing next to me, a young guy. And you say, dude, you have to stand next to this incredibly beautiful woman for 2.5 more hours. And you haven't even broken the ice, man. Give her a lollipop. Give her the lollipop. And I stop this now, right? That's like the TED Talk just keeps going, but it's been 20 years and I have to say this now.
Yeah. Yes, please.
That was not respectful of her personal space. And it was extraordinarily heteronormative. Like it was straight up a dick move. Like
that was 2010. In 2010, though, and you know,
Oh yeah, I had no idea.
Right.
Like you learn, you try
Yeah,
to
yeah,
learn.
yeah, yeah. Right.
But I always want to recognize that now.
Yeah, yeah,
I love
right.
the story. Even though when I was told to do it, I said I might wreck the flow of the story. You ever had somebody who's really believes in social justice look at you after you told them, no, let's ignore that valid point because it will wreck the natural flow of my presentation. So anyway, she said, I've never seen this guy before. And he turns beet red. He won't even look at me. He holds the lollipop out at arm's length, not making eye contact. And I take it from him because everyone's staring at him now.
Right.
And as soon as I take the lollipop, everything in your demeanor changes. And you just look so upset, so disappointed. And you turn to my parents and you say, would you look at your daughter? Like, look at your little girl. First day away from home. First day without mom and dad to hold her hand. And already she's taking candy from a stranger. Nice parenting.
Yeah.
And she goes, everybody lost it. Like, when you're scared or you're nervous and then someone says something mildly funny, you overlap.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And she goes, but I don't know why, man, but in the laughter, something in my mind changed. And I just said, don't quit today. You can quit tomorrow. And then the next day, somebody did something and I put it off another day and then another. And it wasn't long before I stopped thinking about leaving. I haven't talked to you once in the 4 or 3 years since that happened. But I heard that you were leaving. And before that happened, I had to come and tell you, you were an incredibly important part of my life. And I will miss you. So good luck. And she just wanders off, which kind of sucks. Like, don't do that. Don't tell someone they change your life, drop the mic.
She got you.
I'm like, what? And I think she realized that because she turned around, she came back and she said, there is one more thing you should know. I have been dating that guy for 3 years since you introduced us that morning. And then a year and a half after I moved 1,000 miles away, she invited me to their wedding.
Wow.
Yeah, she married the dude. And as you alluded to, the big piece is that I don't remember that.
Right.
I have no recollection of that moment.
Right.
But to think that maybe the biggest moment of leadership in my life is something that I don't remember. And I told that story, not about leadership when I first started telling it. I told it to the volunteers to be like, look.
Right.
Like, she remembers 3 years later, this thing that I did through Shinorama.
Right.
It's the horrible name of the charity. And I could think it had already been there for 15 years because we shine shoes for money.
Oh, nice.
I just started to realize that I wanted them to know that the groundwork that they lay, the impact that they have, the behavior as they run the campaign changes things. There was a young volunteer, brilliant guy, who worked incredibly hard all summer to put on a special type of fundraiser. It was a crazy boat race across a pond in the middle of town. People brought their boats, businesses made their own stuff out of recycled materials. It was insanity. Everything sank. It was a wild, good time. Didn't make any money. It just didn't. It lost money.
Right.
And he was heartbroken because he believed in the cause.
Right.
7 years later, without his knowledge, that was one of the biggest fundraisers in the country for the charity. But he had graduated. He had moved on.
Right.
Failure in his wake. No, he didn't. Yeah. He laid a foundation that other brilliant people built on. That's how I started telling the lollipop moment.
Oh, I love it.
I told it a lot. People liked it.
Right.
The call. And in the actual story of the lollipop moment, so I don't get to tell this story very often. So I hope
to go for it. This is the gold. There's
leadership moments all along the way.
Yes. That's Exactly.
So here's the next leadership moment. It's a part of this whole thing. One, that girl came up and told me.
Yes.
Later on, I was asked, which is a lollipop moment? You giving her the lollipop or her telling you? Which one did you mean? Because I say we need to create more
lollipop moments. Yeah.
So one day, one of my students sends me an email that says you have to watch this with like 7 exclamation points. My only response was 1 exclamation point. All right, you're a grown up, use punctuation. But it was a link, and I'm busy. I didn't you put it down.
Yeah. Right.
One night, it's late. I'm emptying up my inbox. You get to the email. I love this person. I respect them immensely.
Right.
I'm not gonna move the email out of my inbox without watching the video.
Right.
So I turn it on, and it's a TED Talk, my first one I had ever seen. I didn't even know what TED was.
Right.
And it's Ken Robinson, Do Schools Kill Creativity?
Okay.
And one of the things that I really believe in is that we are raised to believe that if we want to be seen as successful, we have to make people look at us and say, oh, wow, I can't do that. I can't speak like that. I can't run a
right.
business like that.
I have to be odd or unique. Right?
Yeah. I've come to believe that maybe one of the greatest things we can do for other people is to give them the opportunity to say, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. There's a power.
Right.
I thought I was the only one afraid of that, hurt by that, hiding that.
Yep.
It's why I talk about being bipolar. It's why I talk about being a recovering alcoholic. And one of the things that caught me as I'm watching this Ken Robinson is I'm like, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who feels this way. I'm not the only one who sees education like this. It was so liberating. I started using TED Talks in all my workshops.
Oh, beautiful.
And then that same student busts in 2 months later and says, there's a TED Talk in Toronto, a TED event in Toronto. They have 12 speakers. 2 of them are open nominations. Well, you should do it. And I said something, and you said this word earlier too. I said, I'm just a part-time speaker. This is what I do for a living. I'm just a part-time speaker. For as long as I can remember, and apparently as long as my students can remember, one of my key messages was you can't use the word just to describe who you are, what you do. I'm just the host. Yeah, the guy who organizes it.
Right.
Puts all the work in week to week. Just that guy.
Right. Just that guy.
And I used it. And have you ever had like your kids or someone who works for you, like just throw your own crap back in your face? Like,
right. Oh yeah.
Anyway, I blew him off. I said, look, I was scared, right? Straight up. And so I get a call the day after I quit my job. That's a whole other story. I'm sitting waiting for 1-800-GOT-JUNK to come and take my life away.
Yes.
Like sitting on a couch I'm throwing out in the middle of the room, waiting for them to arrive. Phone rings. It's the organizers of TED Toronto. They say, look, we had open nominations and a couple people got 2. You got 43.
Oh.
My students had used this new thing called to start a campaign to nominate me for TED Toronto.
Oh, nice.
He called to tell me I had gotten it, that I had 6 minutes. And I went, I can't introduce myself in 6 minutes.
Right.
Yeah. And they said, well, that's what you got. Come on out and do a speech. I called up the first thing is my student coming in and saying, you can't say that you're just anything. We believe in you. We're going to nominate you. We're not. So there's a lesson there. I would never have done the thing that broke my career open if a student of mine had not come in and say, you need to take your own advice. And I always remember how close I came to not doing that because I was scared. Then there's another leadership moment. And every one of you listening can be one of these people for your friends and the people you love. Do not let them hide their talent. Don't let them say, I'm not good enough. I'm not a pro. There's a power that comes from saying you must put your whatever it is out into the world. I then get so I've been accepted. I say yes. I call my best friend from back in the day. He used to run the campaigns with me, like the person without whom you just aren't as successful.
Right.
I called him up and I said, I've got 6 minutes. I don't know what to talk about. And he said, you got to tell the lollipop story, you idiot. And I said, oh man, it's a TED event. Like TED, it's the big red.
Like it's the big show.
Yeah. Like I can't tell that story. It doesn't have enough gravitas. And it's
no, not at all.
I said it. I said it. And there's this long pause on the phone. And then my buddy goes, you need to get over yourself.
Right.
I'm like, pardon? He goes, dude, your entire message is that something that's accessible to everyone is made too complicated and inaccessible.
Right.
This is the biggest audience you will ever have, and you won't tell the best story you have because you're afraid it won't make you sound smart enough.
Wow.
Don't be a hypocrite. Don't be afraid. Tell the lollipop story.
Wow.
So I do that terrible version of the lollipop story that's on TED because it's an 8-minute story I told in 6 minutes.
Right.
As a professional speaker, watching that video is torture because I'm so and I don't pause. I have people tell me that they use that speech as a final for English as a second language because if you can understand that speech because of how quickly it's spoken,
right,
you can understand English.
And even in that, there's like grace that flowed into that moment, because I guarantee you part of the reason that it's been so viral is because it is shorter.
Yeah, without a doubt. It's a huge,
right?
Look, man, I don't remember giving it. The last piece of leadership I remember is classrooms and amphitheaters, lights were on. I had not done that I can think of anything that significant staging. Right. And so I got on stage the day of, not like rehearsal, all the lights were in your eye. I couldn't see the audience. And I speak like in conversation with the audience. And so you kind of panic because you're already scared. I'm like, I can't see anything. But there was one person I could see in the front row, just because of the way the lights hit. It was George Coronis. He was giving a speech that day about how he got bit by a bat that carries Ebola, and he had to wait 5 days to find out if he was going to die because he was 8 days from a hospital.
Oh my God.
But George, who I had never met, sat in the front row, and I looked down, and that guy just gave like the biggest smile and like one of those like fist pump, like, and the whole thing, anytime I felt like I was losing it, I looked over at this stranger, and just, he was so on my side. And we have been friends ever since that day. Like I found him afterwards just to let him know that to be a stranger willing to like see somebody struggling and just give them the nod, like I'm here with you. I'm sure he was going through the same stuff, right? Like I was the third speaker. God, thank God. Like, you know, I'm sitting
the whole day, right. Torture.
I've done that since. It's not cool. But yeah, there's so much leadership in not just the story for me, but along the way. Like that's a 20-minute version of the lollipop story. I'm sorry, man, but like I very rarely get the chance to say my career in many ways was broken by that talk. Like I had a full-time business speaking before that talk broke. The talk was given in 2010. It hit TED in 2012.
Oh, wow. Gotcha.
It was a year and a half. It was on the internet. It got 10,000 views. I thought that was amazing.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so on the anniversary of or when I hit 10,000 views, I called TED Toronto and said, I want to make a donation in your name to any charity you want, because I can't believe you helped me get this word out. That was on Tuesday. On Friday, I got the call saying TED's going to run it on their main site. So that was Friday afternoon. And by Monday morning, there was almost 300,000 views on that.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Wow. And I think now it's like 6.5 million.
Wow.
Like crazy. I can't go see it because then you read the comments.
And,
don't read the comments.
Don't read the comments.
You write a book. Don't read the comments.
People are crazy. But I just, there's so much beauty in that story. There's so much, just in the story itself, there's just so many lessons and so much just aha moments is what I sometimes call them, those special moments. But I mean, the first thing I just want to recognize in the story, at least what it comes across to me. So I'll be kind with my comments. So since we're live, right? I'm not going to, it's that you were, you know, in the first of the story, when you're out there and you're giving lollipops away, you're trying to make people laugh. You're trying to make people feel good. You're trying to help in a way, I'm going to say loving, but you're out there in a loving way. You're trying to help people feel comfortable with this new environment. It's almost like you were, and that's why I think it landed so well. Because to your point, in today's society and all the things that have come about, you know, were you in her space, but that wasn't your energy, right? I've got friends of mine who, two friends, one can say one thing that's like, I would be like horrified if they said it. And the other friend can say the exact same thing, but because of their energy and the way they carry themselves, it's like, okay, you're a dick. But it's funny, right? I mean, but I don't take it the way that it's demeanor, it's delivery, but ultimately I think it's heart.
Yeah, one of the things I've come to grips with is as I learn more and more is that intention is nearly as important as impact. Right?
Yes.
Me wanting to be friendly and funny and whatever doesn't matter if it makes her scared and awkward.
Right.
It didn't. Like that's the bonus. I just want to recognize it could have. The other thing too is I can't believe I'm going to say this. Everything you just described about what I was trying to do that morning is what I've tried to do since then.
Oh,
but
interesting.
I can't take credit for that. Like that kind of two things I was doing that day. I was promoting the hell out of my charity.
Right.
And I was flirting with first-year girls. Right? I was in third year. That's it. The lollipop moment, and this is a big part of my work from here on in. So I just want to acknowledge that. I don't want to take credit where I don't deserve it.
Yes.
Is that it was an accident. It was a complete and total accident. It was not what I intended to do. Yes, I wanted people to feel welcome. Yes. I wanted to connect with people. I wanted to look cool. I wanted to look cool to the new guys, the new girls, and I wanted to hit a goal because the goal was what mattered. That final fun.
Right. Yep.
Then the lollipop moment happens. It was an accident, right? But I didn't find out for 3 more years. I was so accomplishment, right?
Yes.
How you looked at the end of the mission. And so it was an accident. So my work now is focused on how we can create lollipop moments. So moments of interpersonal interaction consciously. That was an accident, but it was a profoundly impactful accident. So once she told me that, looking back on my life, I started to be like, okay, what you just described, that's what I want to do. You know what I mean? I want to go out there and be like, in each of these moments, and laughter and jokes are such a dangerous thing, because I realized as time went on and I talked to people who I'd met like years before, and I found out that in many ways I was off-putting, because I would make these jokes. I would be I was undiagnosed bipolar, right? So what happens is you start to realize that making, like, our instinct is to make fun of something or make a joke.
Right, exactly.
I started to realize I would do that at people's expense, or at the expense of their comfort. Right. Ever since that young woman told me about this, I have tried to do what you described, to go out there and recognize that maybe no one I've talked to has had anyone be polite to them today.
Right.
It's interesting. I saw on Instagram yesterday, someone telling a story that was almost word for word from my book, but it happened to them, about getting to the front of a line where a cashier was working so hard and turning to the candy counter and saying, hey, I can't decide which one is your favorite. And this happened to me like right after we started developing my new process. And she snapped at me, the caramels. Like, look, man, there are words in the English language you don't expect to ever hear snapped in anger. Caramels is one of them. Like, like puppies. Like, it just doesn't
it doesn't resonate.
Snap off, ooh, bubbles. Like, you can't do it. And so I threw the caramels on, and when she went to put them in my bag, I said, no, I got them for you. Like, you've been working so hard. This is leadership, and I'm supposed to teach it. And I just wanted to say you're the best cashier I've seen. Because look, the more people in our society that people think can do a job, the less likely we are to recognize excellence in that job. And so everyone's like, oh, everyone can be a bus driver or a janitor. Like, and so they don't recognize stupendous excellence in that job enough. And I did for this girl. She broke into tears. Like, I'm Canadian. I have apologized to inanimate objects. So now she's crying. And I said, I'm sorry. And she said, no, it's no one's even been polite to me today, and you bought me chocolates. I don't know how to process this. Imagine if we went through every day thinking that the person to whom we're speaking, not a single person has been polite to them today. Like, there's an excitement that comes from knowing you're the first non-dick that someone has dealt with at that day. You know what I mean? Whether it's true or not, like, in that, like, and I'll tell you where I try to use it the most right now is airports. Like the people at the gates of airports. Come on, people. They didn't make the policies. They think they're smarter than you do, because they screamed at them all the time. I have a friend who brings thank you cards. To write to those people, to write to flight attendants, to write to the person at our version of Dunkin' Donuts, which is Tim Hortons. So that, I think, is a big part of what drives me. Is there were these big moments that impact people. This was one of the biggest moments of impact I had in my life, and I don't remember it. But of all of the books that I've written and the organizations that I've created or run and the programs that I've built, that might be the biggest thing I ever did to an individual person, and I don't remember it. And it's not what you accomplish in life, it's how you behave along the way. And I accidentally behaved as my best self in that moment. And now I teach people how to do it every day. Like, we teach a tool called the leadership test, and it's 6 questions that are designed to drive value-driven behavior every day and impact other people positively. And then I teach people, once they get past that, how to create their own. And it's really like what's driven me. But it's been, what you just said was giving me too much credit, and I have to acknowledge that. But it did make me realize that I was doing that stuff for the wrong reasons. I was doing it to look good, to look cool, to get accomplishments and accolades. And I spent my whole life doing that. And I hadn't mattered to people along the way, because your grades don't impact anyone. Like, just you. Like, if you go through as a straight A student and that's all you got, you didn't matter.
Exactly.
And you know what? And I'm sorry if that sounds harsh to anybody out there. Like, I lost a friend in my 3rd year university who was a C student, and like 1,200 people came to his funeral. And I looked around and was like, on paper, I've accomplished more than this guy, but he matters. He matters more. The university, because he was dying from cancer, the university, was 23 years old, decided they wanted him to get his degree, even though he wouldn't come back to finish his last, I guess, credits or whatever.
Right.
And so they sent his best friends to Toronto to deliver his degree to him. The
Wow.
university didn't do it. They sent his best friends. They paid for it.
Right.
And when we got to the hotel room, or sorry, to the hospital room, my apologies. They held out the piece of paper and said, the university wanted you to know they're so proud you're part of our community and they wanted you to get what you came for. And Jason looks at his boys and he looks at this piece of paper, and my whole life was that piece of paper, man, because that piece of paper led to leadership positions.
Right.
And he looks at it and he goes, get what I came for. Like, guys, I didn't go there to get that. I went there to get all of you.
Nice.
And I have everything I need from that school. My life wasn't about a piece of paper. I'll come and get it myself, or I don't need it. And that, to me, like, I think of that twice, 3 times a week.
Right.
And like, my life ain't the piece of paper.
Mm-hmm.
My life is, he didn't realize this, but he embodied, when he walked into a room, people felt safer. I don't know if that, psychological safety is something we can talk more and more about.
Yeah.
People who walk in the room and everyone feels safer. This person isn't going to pick on people. This person is going to create an atmosphere where other people don't feel like they can pick on people.
Right.
And that's how this guy was. I lived my life for a piece of paper. He lived his life for the guys that brought it. Now I try to teach people very early on in my life, I was driven entirely by my to-do list. I think a lot of us.
Right.
And I think that the leadership that I teach is aimed at the end to give people a way to live their leadership each day and maintain momentum every day and give themselves evidence that they matter every day. So here's my question to you and to everybody listening. Are you ready?
We're ready.
Okay. Why do you matter?
That's a great question.
Please don't edit out the pause.
I won't, because I'm really why do I matter?
Why do you matter?
That's a great question. I've never had anybody ask me that question.
Then you just answer my next question.
I've never had anybody ask me why I matter. I guess my simplified version is I matter because God created me, and so I must matter for a reason. And I don't have an answer for why I actually matter.
Ask anybody who loves you, and they do.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
And this is what got me, man. The first time I ever asked that question was to, I've been in education for about 13 years. And I never asked a student, why do you matter? Any teachers out there? When was the last time you asked that question? Any parents out there? I was like, if you have kids, ask them that question tonight. And if they're under the age of 5, they will give you answers that melt you.
Right.
We go off to school and we stop believing that why we matter is up to us to determine. It's supposed to be evaluated externally. Pieces of paper with numbers, letters on them, transcripts, right? And we all spend 20 of the most formative years of our lives in that system. And as a result, I think a lot of people never unlearn the lesson that it's not up to you why you matter. I asked a brilliant student, why do you matter, right before he graduated, just as a conversation starter. I didn't know what it would do to him. Did what it did to you and everybody else I've ever asked. They blinked twice.
Right.
And then he said, and this changed my career. He said, well, I don't yet.
Right.
That's why I'm working so hard. Like that's an unacceptable answer to get from anybody you love, anyone you care about, anyone you want to be better. I don't matter. That's why I'm working so hard. I thought it must have been a liar. Other students, colleagues, all around the world, 95% of the people to whom I pose that question can't give me an answer, or they're making one up on the spot.
Right. Yeah. Well, and I thought the same thing. The what you said he answered is kind of what I was feeling inside myself. It's like, I don't know that I do matter. I mean, I have kids, I have a wife, I get that, but I don't know how I matter, and that I think that's a very good pivot point for me to really actually think about.
Well, they do. Like all the people just like they know why you matter, and all of you do. Like that question's so powerful, and then sometimes people have such a strong response to it that I wonder if I want to keep asking it.
Right.
Like, people break into tears on that.
I bet.
But it's not because I want to point out you don't matter. It's because I want to point out you don't give yourself enough evidence every day that you matter, right?
Right.
So imagine this. Imagine if every single night before you go to bed, you have to prove you deserve another day on this planet. not at the end of a quarter or
Right. Right.
plan, end of your life.
Right.
Every before you go to bed, you have to prove you deserve another day on this planet. To prove it, you have to pass a test. You have to answer 3 questions out of 6 correctly. Just pass it, 6 questions.
Right.
The thing is, you're given the questions in the morning.
Right.
If that was the reality, the questions would be non-negotiable, right? You wouldn't answer them when you had extra time. You wouldn't do it in between meetings, picking up the kids. That right now is how we treat our to-be list, is we do it when we have extra time. What I try to do every day when I try to teach people is this idea that when we don't know what the future holds, we need a map for today, because 5-year momentum is way more important than 5-year plans. Momentum is more important than plans.
Yes.
Right? Options are more important than plans. Make decisions based on momentum and options, not locked into some kind of plan. I'm not saying don't have plans. I'm saying don't treat them as the holy path, right?
Right.
And so what we did as a group of students, a senior group of students and myself, is we created a list of 6 values we wanted to live every day. We wanted to produce evidence that this mattered. That same student I asked, why do you matter? Once repeated a quote to me that has always stuck with me. He said, it's a lot easier to stand up for something than it is to live up to it, isn't it? And I'm like, well, let's actually live up to our crap. Let's actually close the gap to who we want to be and how we behave. So let's pick 6 values. And over the years, they've changed. So these are the ones that now drive me and my company. We're driven by impact, growth, courage, empowerment, class, and self-respect. Every one of those values has a definition with the phrase a commitment to. Impact, a commitment to creating moments that cause people to feel like they're better off for having interacted with you. Self-respect, a commitment to recognizing when you're empty, you have nothing to give. Courage is a commitment to taking action when there's the possibility of loss, and so on. And for each one of those values, we created a question. And so 6 values equals 6 questions equals the leadership test. Why question? 2 behavioral psychology effects play into this. One, the Zygarnik effect. It says things on your to-do list that you haven't finished take up a more prominent spot in your consciousness than things that you have. Things on the list that you haven't done bug you until you finish them. You don't understand the depth of how much they bug you, though. The other is the question behavior effect that says asking people questions about a behavior is more likely to make them engage in that behavior than telling them to do it or asking them to. Asking you about generosity over and over in different guises over breakfast is more likely to make you seize, create, seek out an opportunity for generosity. So if questions drive human behavior, if unfinished tasks cause psychic discomfort, then you know what we're going to do? We're going to harness the power of the unanswered question. Everybody listening, none of us, I think, truly understand how much the human brain cannot stand unanswered questions. It really does not like them. So here's what the brain does when you deal with an unanswered question. You get it right, you get it wrong. All right, those are 2 options, but it's the third option when you don't know, but you're not willing to give up. You think, okay, I'll put it aside, I'll move on. So what happens is your brain says, all right, your conscious mind can move on. You got to focus on other stuff. I'm going to work on this down over here in the subconscious. And hammers away at that question, trying to find an answer. If it can't find an answer, it will make one up. And it will convince you that it's true. The human brain would rather believe a lie it created than deal with the fact that it does not know the answer. Human exploration, faith, religion, folklore, all come from the fact that human brains cannot deal with unanswered questions. And so we said, all right, how about we create a set of questions that go into our phones as an expectation? We leverage the fact that because our brain knows that there are questions that are unanswered, it will actually change our behavior without our knowledge in order to make it more likely that we will engage in the behaviors tied to those values. The leadership test consists of these 6 questions. What have I done today to recognize someone else's leadership for impact? That's what the lollipop moment was. She came up and told me I had mattered. What have I done today to make it more likely someone would learn something? That can be you or someone else. You know, the best way to do that? Only ask questions. And I know people say that, but here's the actual challenge. 1 day a week, no stories, no advice, no directions, no orders, only questions. 1 day a week. You will start to, what leaders do is they ask questions that cause the other people to ask themselves more questions. Like if you ask the first question that leads someone down a path to a revelation, that's leadership. What did I try today that might not work, but I tried it anyway? For courage. We're educated out of our courage.
Mm-hmm.
The worst thing you can do in school is make mistakes. And school doesn't measure who's the most talented at the end. It measures who made the fewest mistakes along the way. So we get educated out of it. Empowerment is, what did I do today to move someone else closer to a goal?
Mm-hmm.
The first time we're ever given a grade, we realize we're being ranked.
Right.
What's the point of ranking people if it's not to make sure the people at the top get something the people at the bottom don't get? There's no 9-year-old out there who doesn't at least unconsciously understand that at this point.
Right.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to rank. The people at the top deserve more and will get more than the people at the bottom.
Right.
What did I do? When did I elevate instead of escalate today for class?
Mm-hmm.
Say this one again. Class is a commitment to treating people in situations better than they deserve to be treated.
Mm.
This one's hard right now at times,
Mm-hmm.
but elevating a situation means trying to succeed. Escalating means trying to win.
Mm-hmm.
Very few things stand in the way of success more than the desire to win. And
Right.
that's about leadership, not politics. But if you want to know the difference between a leader and a politician, and look, not all politicians run for office, and not like, and so I'm just saying there are politicians in every office in like, I'm not just talking about people in Congress or
Right. Right.
The difference between a politician and a leader is how they use fear.
Mm.
Politicians will add fear to situations to try to win.
Mm-hmm.
Leaders remove fear from situations to try to succeed.
No, I
And
like that. Yeah.
be a leader, not a politician, especially if you've been elected as a politician.
Right. Right.
And the last one, the foundational one, self-respect. What did I do today to be good to myself?
Oh, nice.
And if you pass that test, you get 3 answers out of 6 every day.
Mm-hmm.
And you think to yourself, I have to get 3 of them.
Mm-hmm.
A couple of things happen. One, every single day you provide evidence that you matter to yourself.
Right.
It's undeniable. If the question is answered, then you manage to live your values. The leadership test, this little tool that we use, attempts to, you hit it earlier. Viktor Frankl did this better than any human being ever.
Right.
And I'm so inspired by it. And I try to repackage his message because not enough people are aware of it. Here is an unfortunate reality of life and work. But I think if we recognize unfortunate realities, we can make them less negatively impactful, right? And one of the unfortunate realities is we're not always in charge of what we get to do every day, but we are always in charge of who we are.
Right.
But the only people who take that from us are us because we don't flex that muscle. Any muscle that isn't flexed or used atrophies, right?
Right.
And so the idea of the leadership test is it gives you a roadmap through uncertainty. When we don't know what the future holds, we often will not act in the present because we're afraid of messing up the future, right? But it's so much more important to be decisive than it is to be certain in life and business, because you can be decisive. You can never be certain. So the leadership test says to me, I don't know what the end of this pandemic will hold. 2 years ago, right?
Right.
I sat there and I said, I don't know when it's over. I don't know where I'll be when it's over. I don't even know where to start right now. And that's familiar to a lot of people. But I had the leadership test. And for the first 6 weeks, when I didn't know what was going on, I still knew every day that I had to do at least 3 things so that when the future arrived, I would be someone I was proud of who would still be moving forward with momentum.
Got it.
Be able every day to go home and say, everything outside of my control blew up in my face today. But in these 3 moments, in those 3 moments, I was the person I wanted to be. That's a gift. That is
totally.
It is a gift. It strengthens you and it shifts your mindset from waste to loss. And I think that right now, if we don't manage to live a value and if nothing we wanted to happen that day happens, we're like, today was a waste.
Right.
But if we go through the day and we say, okay, everything I wanted to happen blew up, but I managed to have impact. I managed to be courageous and I managed to show some self-respect today. Look, man, it doesn't overwhelm the fact that you got fired or that project went to hell. But what it does do is it makes you say, this day wasn't a waste. I lost. But there's something different about playing and losing.
Right.
And like, I just watched like Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania 26 again. And guess what? The loser of that got a standing ovation too. You know what I mean? Like it's, you fight, you do it well, you get back up off and you do it. But what it does, it gives you 3 things to hold on to. It gives you 3 pieces of evidence that you matter. And eventually, even our own brains can't deny 1,000 pieces over the course of a year.
Wow. Is there somewhere people can access those questions?
You know what? Yeah, I think they're on my website, drewdudley.com. Like,
okay.
I try to keep them under wraps because obviously it's kind of the reveal of the book and the.
Yeah. But no, I think
I'm sure on my website they are. If not, if you, here's a good way to do it. If you text DAY space ONE, so day one, 2 separate words, to 72,000 on your phone, you will get a bunch of resources. You'll get a link where you can go, and what will happen is you'll be able to download the slides from one of my key presentations about this, and there's a whole slide with it on that.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah. So summation, some other resources if you want. You can go to drewdudley.com, but honestly, if it goes right to your phone, just text day one to 72,000. It'll link you right up with a bunch of my stuff.
Okay. So it's day space one.
DAYONE, two words.
2 words to 72,000, and that will give you the resource for a lot of other tools, but you'll get the list in there. Well, I appreciate that. Well, Drew, thanks. This has been such a pleasure. I was so happy you were able to come on today. We're in our community, we're always honored and grateful to have people that are such inspiring leaders, and truly you are an inspiring leader. And I want to thank you for inspiring me today, inspiring our listeners that will listen today, and over the next however many years, right? That's the beauty of these podcasts. We've had podcasts that have been out 8 years, and people are still listening to them for the first time. So thank you for being an inspiration. Thank you for what you're doing. And hey, please come back on the show. Please come back on and visit with us again. I love it. For me, it felt like we could have gone 3, 4, 5 hours and done a whole workshop here. So again, thank you for your passion. Thank you for continuing to drive such a great message, especially in today's world, that everyone needs to hear. So thank you so much, Drew.
My absolute pleasure. Invite me back anytime. This was a blast.
Thank you, Drew. You have a beautiful day.
You too, man.
Bye. Thank you for being a part of the BriteVibe podcast. For more information, go to britevibe.com. That's BRITE vibe, VIBE.com. Thank you for listening.